So he goes on to say that, I think this is Livy, is among the writers after Polybus who chronicles reports of unusual events, right? Called prodigies. Back then, Hume uses this term as well. For each year, some of these we would regard as natural phenomena and others as originally fabricated, but they undoubtedly stem from Livy's sources. Tacitus avers that a dignified historian ought not to collect fabulous tales merely to delight his readers. So you don't just, collect these tales just because, you want your readers to be excited, but warns that he cannot dare deny the truth of common tradition. So notice Tacitus here is making a distinction between the historian or writer who collects these tales so that he can keep people reading his stuff as opposed to ones that don't. But he himself can't deny the truth of some of the common stories that he was familiar with. And of course, Keener goes on to tell us that other sources strongly suggest that Tacitus personally believed at least in the gods and in sacrificing to them. So obviously he couldn't deny it because he believed in the gods as well.
Right. And let's also take into account, too, that the claim isn't about a society's stories versus it's not caring about those. It's talking about the histories, the things that are said to have happened in a time, in a place, with certain context. So things like the Iliad is known to be a story. It's Homer's writing this epic, but he also seems to be including parts of history. So it's almost this historical fiction, but people are of understanding that, the gods interfering with Hector and Achilles isn't part of the history, but it's part of the story. And that's not being what's talked about here. What's being talked about here is, the events of, there might have been a war of Troy, but we understand that the Iliad is a story that may be concerning historical facts, that Homer probably went to the area and saw the battlefields and knew how to talk about the land for his story. So I think that's something, too, that we have to distinguish between the stories of a society versus the history that may include things like these paranormal claims or miracle claims, or may have a blending into it. And that's where Tacitus and Polybus, I think, rightly cover that embellishing upon it is not story here, but we're wanting to include history, and we want to leave the story to the storytellers and history to the historians. All right, so many historians sometimes qualified reports with "it is said" or similar cautionary devices. Reporting wonders in their sources freely, they nevertheless distance themselves from seeming too credulous by warning readers to evaluate the veracity of such reports for themselves, which is very, very interesting here, is they wanted to include it. They think, well, it may have happened. I might be skeptical of it himself, but this clue-in feature here of think of, if you're reading your Bible, the behold. It's to grab your attention. It's to you're going through all these claims, and all of a sudden a behold comes up and it kind of shakes you up. So this "it is said" is a clue to hear that, listen, we're just reporting what was said. We're not making any claims here, and so it's up to you to figure out if this is the case. But this is the good of historians to want to almost over-include details, because if you're just going to leave it to the person whose their job is to write things down, and they make their value claims based on their prejudices, well, then they might be leaving out a lot of things here. And we kind of see that too with elements within the Muslim histories as well.